So if you have people on the government side who aren't, skilled enough or sort of properly positioned to actually like evaluate teams as to whether they excelled at a given exercise and then should go to the next phase, that's an issue, obviously. But even if you do have those folks, then you also have the risk on the contractor side with, okay, these guys knocked it out of the park with the technical challenge, but they're just showing us they're A players. They're a small,
exactly.
They're showing us they're A players, and then we give them the contract. They get an award on, say, speed or whatever, for instance, and then
we brought all the A players on speed, Kevin.
Well, I know. Well, we technically more you, but we. I know we did. But
continue to.
A lot of times, folks don't, right? And they deliver B and C players.
Welcome to It's Fine, a podcast series brought to you by Hunter Strategy. In this episode, we delve into the intriguing world of government requests for proposals, specifically the growing trend of using technical challenges versus traditional proposal submissions. This shift represents a significant change in how government contracts are sought and awarded, prioritizing practical skills and innovative problem solving over traditional compliance and pricing approaches. We're thrilled to have a panel of distinguished guests who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion. Joining us today is Kevin Belanga, the Chief Growth Officer here at Hunter Strategy, who brings extensive insight into the evolution of government RFPs. Alongside him is Jeff Segal, our Chief Technology Officer, offering a more technical perspective on these challenges. Also joining us, longtime friend of Hunter and brilliant technologist, is our very first guest, Kevin Long, the Vice President of Digital Government for Highlight Technologies. His expertise in winning complex technical challenges and then performing the resulting contract at scale will provide unique insight into our discussion. In this episode, we will explore several examples of technical challenges in government, including a trip down memory lane with GSA's COMET, or CIO Modernization and Enterprise Transformation, and the United States Customs and Immigration Services SPEED contract, or Services for Product Engineering and Enterprise Delivery Initiatives. These cases have shown varying levels of success and offer valuable lessons in implementation and outcomes of such approaches. Our panel will share their insights, experiences, and perspectives on these approaches, shedding light on the benefit of technical challenges in government RFPs. Whether you're a government official, a contractor, or simply interested in the intersection of technology and government process, this episode of It's Fine is sure to provide a comprehensive and engaging exploration in the rapidly evolving field. Join us as we navigate the complexities and future of government contracting in the digital age. Welcome, gentlemen. So today I wanted to kick off our discussion by asking, how do technical challenges within federal RFPs differ from traditional proposal submissions, and what advantages do you think that they offer? Kevin, you're our guest today. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure. How they differ? Well, it's more of a show me, don't tell me environment, really. It is, you put developers in a room, you lock the door, and you don't let them out till there's a working software. You throw snacks in every now and then and check in on them. But yeah, it's instead of telling people, trust us, we can do it, you actually get to look at some working code if you do it right.
And what are some different ways that those manifest? Because, there is the literal, and we've done it, lock developers in a room and throw a key situation.
Yeah.
What other ways would you say that these have kind of, because I do agree, it's show me, don't tell me.
Yeah.
I also agree that it's various ways of, it's now an interesting game, I feel like, of how they ask you to show us. That's kind of the new challenge for small businesses, is kind of navigating the different ways. So I don't talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and so they have the because all of the rest of my family works in academia, I think in school terms. So they have take-home tests and they have on-site tests, right? And so a lot of times it's they just give you an assignment and then it's take-home test, and then bring us something back, and then walk us through it. And then they have ones where literally they want to watch you hand jam code, where they can see the interactions among the teams, amongst the team. And so those are the two main types that I've seen. Largely, the take-home test is followed by an in-person test where they want to have someone explain what was done, usually make a change to it so they can watch how you work in person, and then ask questions about why they did things particular ways. Why you didn't use a linting tool. I literally got that question once.
I mean, you should, Lynn, right?
Yeah, well, and when you have what, 10 days to do 30 days of work,
right?
Then and it's not a requirement.
Yeah.
Then some's got to give. I'll take a login page over linting.
And I think if I can jump in, just so there's a really important qualifier that you gave earlier, which is if you do it right.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's really like the $64,000 question is, can they actually do it right? I think we've seen some that did it more right than others. We have also done the participant thing more right than in other times, and less right in some that we were still getting our sea legs under us. But yeah, I think if you can the agencies putting these out can kind of define challenges that maybe are too broad and overarching, maybe not specific enough, but obviously you can also get kind of bogged down in the weeds on it. So, or ones that are maybe they're in isolation, they're reasonable, but do they actually like tie back to the source material? Do they tie back to the actual fundamental mission requirements that are trying to be met? That's actually really hard. It's really hard to do, I think, if you're the government.
Yeah, because you're not going to ask, at least I hope, fingers crossed, you're not going to ask them to develop actual stuff that is necessary for the contract.
Right, exactly.
They're not allowed to ask for free work, but finding something that ticks all of the boxes and is close enough to solve it's really difficult to do, honestly, and to do well. I mean, and it's difficult to evaluate because you need a totally different type of evaluator to see it as well. So,
well, that's also a huge thing too. You need different. I mean, I think we've talked about this before informally, and it's like there's drastically different skill sets that you need if you're the contractor. If you're trying to put together a response, obviously put your typical proposal team, the personnel you're going to pull in slightly different for a traditional approach versus this. But I think
just slightly
different. But it's I think one thing we haven't talked as much about in our own discussions is like your point is equally true that the people that they have doing the evaluation, it puts a lot more kind of onus on the people on the government side who actually do understand these things, who are kind of say, oh yeah, boss, this is these people seem to know what they're talking about, or these ones don't. Whereas maybe the boss would have had a better idea of, from looking at a written proposal, and now it's kind of that boss is delegating to the expert on their staff who does.
And hopefully they have them.
Well, I was going to say, I've never seen an expert on their staff directly. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I've seen some incredibly good evaluators as a product owner that are evaluating the Agile team and the experience, because they're really just kind of saying, like, I'm going to be the one giving you guys these requirements. How's that going to work? Which is, I think, a very fair and kind of slanted in the favor of those on-site lock in a room things, as far as if that's what you care about. That is an interesting representation, but they're almost always augmented by 18F, an OCI contractor. I've seen both. There's definitely some external support there that's really kind of the one to call balls and strikes on the technology side. And I think that does bring a different element, not just in the room for the vendors, but also in the source selection board. You've got this like totally unknown to your culture person that's there just being like, yeah, these people suck, these people were good. And like maybe they're in lockstep with the product owner and maybe that's validating, but like what if they were like, oh, I liked the shitty one? Like that could really throw off like a source selection board in a way that could be very unpredictable.
Yeah, and how well do those, let's call them external entities, truly understand the mission that they're trying to solve? How close does the solution that's been provided meet the capabilities and infrastructure and needs of the agency that you're going to be working for, as opposed to the needs and preferences of the agency where they came from? It's a dance, and it is a very difficult way to approach ensuring technical competence.
But so, I mean, all of these things also ultimately speak to the utility overall of the exercise, right? So if you have people on the government side who aren't, skilled enough or sort of properly positioned to actually like evaluate teams as to whether they excelled at a given exercise and then should go to the next phase, that's an issue, obviously. But even if you do have those folks, then you also have the risk on the contractor side with, okay, these guys knocked it out of the park with the technical challenge, but they're just showing us they're A players. They're a small,
exactly.
They're showing us they're A players, and then we give them the contract. They get an award on, say, speed or whatever, for instance, and then.
Well, we brought all the A players on speed, Kevin.
Well, I know you. I know. Well, we technically more you, but we. I know we did. But
continue to.
A lot of times, folks don't, right, and they deliver B and C players, right? So that's still. I'm not sure how that guards the government against the risk. It's like, okay, you showed me that you know how to do this work with the best people that are employed by the company, but who do you actually have to execute beyond these folks, right?
Well, and let's be real. These code challenges are not 9 to, unless they are like the take-home tests are not 9 to 5. They are not scoped to be, a standard workday for a single team. They are, it is 10 days. What I've seen is 10-day code challenge of that has a weekend in between. So it's a 12-day code challenge that is really 30 days of work because they don't want people to run out, and everybody has to push to get all of it done. So you're doing, 12, 18 hours a day, multiple sprints and retrospectives a day to get it in. And it's a different skill. It is. So does it protect the government from getting technically incompetent vendors? Yes and no. What it does is it gets the government vendors that are competent at code challenges. Now, whether or not that is, closer together than a company that is very good at writing a really brilliant technical proposal, yes and no. I mean, I don't think a code challenge in a vacuum is going to get the right vendor. Period. Even if you require key personnel, and if you don't deliver them, then all that stuff. I mean, it's no one delivers an award fast enough that I've seen to not have a legitimate reason if one of the KP that you've bid literally goes and finds a different opportunity. The A players are they're hard. They're not going to sit around and wait.
Yeah,
they don't have to.
Nope.
Right, and so even if you have all of the intent to do it, it's difficult, and so it is. I really think that in order to avoid, I was at a conference and I heard it called procurement theater. In order to avoid procurement theater, it's almost a yes and. But the hard part is, at what point does it become so expensive to do procurements? Is it an unfair burden for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, or even large businesses that need to steward their B&P funds in a way that is intelligent for it? And so I think it's about finding the right balance between that and the yes and, because you're not going to do a 100-page technical proposal with all of the fancy diagrams and orals as a down select, and then a 2-week take-home test, and then a full day on-site challenge for anything less than hundreds of millions of dollars. And at that point, you know what? It's probably worth it. worth doing that to make sure that you absolutely get the right vendor in there.
Mhm.
But, even at $100 million over a number of years, that's a huge burden.
Yep. And to your point, Kevin, you were talking about just sort of the level of effort from the small business side to actually get prepared for one of these, so that you can actually be competitive and hopefully make it look like. I mean, the level of work that goes into those, and especially as a small business, I mean, it's the usual suspects that participate in these things. So it's, how do you scale that model in a way that is not just completely burning everybody in the company out, right? Because all these people have, 99%.
Well, you have to call your shots. You have to create the infrastructure. You have to keep it up to date.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have, and then you have to call your shots, and you have to team intelligently, right? I mean, but it's still it's a difficult proposition with that.
It is. Don't bring PowerPoint jockeys on as subs, basically.
Well, and there's a couple of things we brought up here I just want to kind of go into, because we talked about the take-home test a lot. I'm curious if we could just dive in on between the in-person and the take-home. The reason I thought of this is because when you mentioned procurement theater, because I think a lot of in-person code challenges, while yes, you get to know the team, you get to know how it's like to work with certain people, etc. Even in some of the ones where they give you 4 or 5 hours, the idea of doing several sprints in a number of hours, to call that anything but theater, is disingenuous. But it's like, but it has value. It's just, is there value in theater? What is that value? I guess that's kind of the question.
I was trying to, as soon as I heard the word theater, I was like, well, I definite, as somebody who did one of those in-person ones several years ago, like Kabuki theater comes to mind. It's just like we had teamed with somebody who was basically just like marketed as, oh, she's the agile expert or whatever, and so she was going to be the scrum master. She did a lot of the talking. It was just like this hired gun kind of a person. But again, it just felt like, oh, like this is just all kind of like 80% BS. Like every time we'd have a break and she would talk, and it was just like, hey, first of all, it was disconnected to what like the rest of the team was actually doing for the most part. It was just like, It was essentially just agile babble, like, and what's that?
This is Comet, right? GSA
Comet? Yeah, this is Comet. Yeah. And so, it was like good, professional, polished agile babble that frankly, they probably appreciated and said, oh, that sounds great. That checks all the boxes. But like, as somebody who's pretty attuned to that, and and my meter,
your radar's going off.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, all right. I'm kind of rolling my eyes.
But but it kills me. But by the same token, I mean, there are even more hired guns out there that will create the most polished ConOps diagram that you ever saw.
Exactly.
That will write the most complete, awesome sounding technical volume for it. I mean, I truly don't envy the government trying to find partners that are going to help them do the critical work that they face, unless they're hiring, Highlight or Hunter. I mean, other than that,
yeah,
I don't envy somebody out there even worth hiring.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just bring all of the work to us, and we can solve all of your problems.
1, 3, 4. No.
So to get on that point, maybe in some of the things that if I'm categorizing some of the things that we've responded to lately in the last, 6 months, there's some that have been, I guess you'd say, larger, holistic, like digital modernization efforts where we did like very serious solutioning, and in our minds, what we thought was like, very creative kind of, oh, wow, we could mix in these technologies, a lot of COT stuff. Yes, custom code, but really like this much bigger solution. And yes, we were still pitching it as an agile team, but not this kind of like, take this primordial clay and like turn it into a masterpiece, but more of a go and get some stuff and assemble it together, versus I think we've also seen some procurements that are, and they're just like, I don't know, get us an agile team. Like that they're very like low on requirement, that specifics for requirements. They're just kind of like, I don't know, we have basic software challenges and we're not happy with the traditional vendors, and we just want somebody who knows how to really do it. And so maybe, the latter group probably lends itself a little better towards a tech challenge. The former one, you really need that. Like I was just thinking on some of those other ones, how would we have even done a tech challenge with that? And it's just, I don't know, it would have been very difficult because we had to lay out all of this complexity in that technical volume versus just kind of like, you don't have that detail. So cool. Just demonstrate something. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And if you don't have someone that can help distill down, like, what is the essence of the problems you're trying to solve, then how do you determine what a good code challenge is? Like you were saying before, I mean, if you don't have a good code challenge to vet what we're trying to do, then, oh my gosh, talk about a huge waste of money for everybody. So that's hard. I mean, I'd actually heard a procurement executive at one of the Air Force software factories pitch an idea that is just, code challenges are too expensive and no one delivers the people that do the code challenge. Written proposals are not sufficient to prove that they have the technical capacity to do the work. So what I've started doing is I say, awesome, you want to bid on this? Send me 2 senior developers and 2 junior developers, and I'm going to do pair programming with them for a full day. We're going to work on something with that. And at the end of that, we're going to evaluate based on the people that they were paired with, on their understanding of agile principles, their approach to coding, their thought processes to solving problems, and an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. And so that they can see the hot shots and they can see the junior people, they get the resumes, they decide, and that's what it is. And I have yet to see that hit the street, but I would throw people at that.
Well, I was going to say, especially if you're going for the we want to conjure agile teams type of contract, it's not, because they're and this is the thing that I wish more contracts officers understood when they like mippered money to like this uber agile vehicle, that like, if your goal is to take something from nothing, you kind of have an idea, you're a great vehicle to use, great concept. If you have good vetting like that, which there's many different ways to do it well, but that's actually a really innovative one for that kind of concept.
Right?
It would actually work.
Because they do XP programming anyway, so it's literally in the environment that they're doing. So
and what it's really testing is your ability to produce, and I'm assuming those people are key, so you award it to those very people. So my point is it's your ability to staff and recruit actually good people. You assume that there's somebody else that's going to do maybe some of the solutioning or some of the broader architecture or other things. But in a contract, like, if you understand that if you have a couple of smart govies or another omnibus architecture contract that you use, then those are some really interesting ways to get work done. And I'd be really, you would really struggle to find a problem with that approach that I could think of at this point. It's actually kind of novel in its simplicity.
I mean, the problem is, how do you explicitly quantify in a non-protestable way for any award of any particular size? Right.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. But for smaller things, I mean, talk about a new approach to code challenge, right? I mean, literally, your junior people pair with one of their senior people, your senior people pair with some of their junior people. Let's go.
Yeah. I like it, but the simplicity factor, that's awesome to me. But again, the government doesn't like anything that's too simple, so I'm sure they'd figure out a way to make it complicated.
The auditability of that is going to be a challenge. I think there are ways to overcome it, but you'll only be able to find certain people that can be capable of being the peer of that paired programming exercise that can also do that level of contractual overhead in a way that doesn't make your life a nightmare in protest. But I guess if you get it on a vehicle level and it's attached, I don't know, if you get it in a way where protests are hard, because sometimes within vehicles, protests are hard, if not impossible. That might be a way to streamline something like that.
Yeah.
I was just imagining taking your senior most, top developer
And just using them again and again and again.
Sometimes this model, right? You need the senior dev and you need the junior dev. I'm talking about taking that senior most dev and then like de-aging them in that like they're going to be in a high school movie where they're going to play like an 18.
That's what we're gonna do to you, Jeff.
Just like I'm the junior. Oh, look at me.
So I think that the intent on that is you also have to send the resume of the people for it. Like, I mean, at that point, I guess it would be awesome if you can pay you at a junior dev rate, then yeah, thumbs up, let's go. But
I was going to say, I think pricing and financial factors will keep the abuse of that type of approach at bay pretty readily. Oh, sure, you want to sneak in a senior person for $90 an hour? You got us.
Yeah. Right.
When the junior developer walks in the room, it's just Jeff with like a baseball cap holding a skateboard.
True.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like
contacting. I'm actually two people.
Bart Simpson.
It's like, hi, I am your entire junior team.
Yeah.
It's really interesting the way the government is trying to find ways fingers on keyboards can help them evaluate for technical competence. And I think they've discovered that yeah, I mean, the big take-home tests, I mean, I'll throw literally as many agile teams at up to the point where the integration of the team slows them down too much, right? And the on-site work is how much can you really get done in a day, right? And so you're not seeing everything go through it, and so it's hard with that. And then how do you keep the most amazing ConOps artist, which, I mean, working at Khaki, I mean, I've seen some beautiful, like, bring tears to your eyes ConOps diagrams that literally encapsulated in a diagram a 75-page technical approach just beautifully. But that doesn't mean that they could do the work. I mean, we could, because, I was going to help run the contract, but, the government doesn't know that. So it's
diagram of everything in life.
So one other thing I wanted to ask, because a certain agency, I won't name names, sometimes likes to ask for videos and other accoutrement of performance art to come as a result of mostly the take-home tests, to be fair, right? Those are usually either RFI based or they're kind of a sister deliverable to a take-home MVP. I'm just curious if anyone thinks that that's effective for any reason. And to me, by the way, just to throw my bias out there, if your goal is in some citizen services thing where production content and media content is part, like if you're doing healthcare.gov over again and citizen engagement is part of your deal, sure. Right, that's not a particular problem for me.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, if strategic communications is in scope, then that would make a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, I haven't seen that actually be the case when asked for yet, but I can extend the range of my brain to believe that such a case might exist.
So I literally have had a contract that had data management, data migration, cloud migration, PMO, CIO advisory, and strategic communications all in one contract. Now, they didn't ask for video. They didn't ask for code challenge. They asked for the big fancy write-up, and we delivered it great. But yeah, so they exist.
And one other thing that I just wanted to kind of talk through here is orals as compared to both the technical challenge or the take-home test with what is effectively an orals presentation. Mm-hmm. More effective, less effective for different scopes than agile, but maybe not agile. How are we?
So I'll jump in. I love orals, not just because I think I'm pretty good at them and enjoy coaching them and things like that. With with requiring the right people to be in orals, I think that gives the government an understanding of literally who are the key people they're going to be working with, right? By and large. And they may not get 100% because of award time frames and things like that, but they'll probably get some of them, right? So they get to see who they're going to work with. They get to hear their approach. They get to see how they think on their feet. And let's be real, software development and software development management, as often as not, is a lot about planning, but then thinking on your feet, right? It is. If it was easy, everybody would do it. They would not need people like us, right? And so getting to hear from them, hear about their philosophy, hear about their experience, and then see how they would handle different problems. It is no joke the way they get to understand who they would work with. Yeah. And so I'm a huge fan of including orals in almost everything of any size.
So, and I think that's really, that's the only thing that's going to guard a little bit against the bait and switch that the customer might potentially get if the company's awarded the contract, right? Being able to see and hear from some of the people that would actually be supporting the contract.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part is that some of the most no joke technically competent could absolutely deliver to a T what is actually needed, just are terrible in orals. And so it does cut out some of the uber geeks that, if they're not speaking in code, like literally code, that's not their comfort level, right? I mean, standing up in public speaking is a totally different skill for a lot of stuff. And so for management and leadership roles where that's part of the job, absolutely. Requiring senior developers and folks whose job is to really be heads down and hand jamming code, that's where you're going to get into problems because it's going to incentivize bringing on people with ancillary skill sets.
I think they're also pretty good use of the government's time, at least in terms of like pretty little investment. They get to ask all their specific questions, get them answered right away. They don't have to do a huge amount of prep, even if the contractors are doing a pretty significant amount of prep.
There is more contract side, I feel. Yeah. Like, you're allowed to say this, you're not, like it's more of that protest auditability side of orals that make orals more. That's generally, I would say, everything that makes orals challenging for the government is on that side and not on the receiving side of asking questions.
Well, the same way creating a good code challenge can be challenging. You have to ask the right questions, though, right? And so if they're not putting a lot of care into what they want to hear from vendors, beyond, hey, give me your elevator spiel. I mean, because everybody's going to be trained to absolutely, wax rhapsodic about how amazing they and the team is, but to like literally sort of like peel the onion back 2 layers, right? And
the last one that I did, I don't remember. There were very few questions. It was all remote, and it was all on Teams. Nobody had their camera on. We had ours on, but no one from the government.
Of course, that's not unusual.
So it was very, very strange because you can't see a single face that you're talking to, and again, with like very few questions, it just was kind of like, did our spiel, answered a couple questions.
I've done in-person orals and via Teams orals. I had to do Teams orals while being in the same building as the evaluators. That was interesting. But I like in person because if you can read a room, you can see where they're engaging and where they're not. And it is, I wish it were not as rare as it is for virtual orals to not have the feds or the evaluators on camera also. Because you're right, it's literally talking to a black wall. It's
the unforgiving purple Teams glow up that you're seeing, and it's the worst.
Yeah, you don't know if any, like I was making little jokes about, this particular customer space. I had spent a lot of time in like years ago. And so I was kind of trying to keep it light and reference little like war stories and stuff from a long time ago. And I don't know, were any of these people around?
Yeah. Did your jokes land?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no
exactly.
idea. We won, so that worked out. But
so they did. So the answer is yes.
I guess they did. I mean, and
part of being a human being also is, when we interact with one another, we pick up on nonverbals and things like that. So, I mean, it does. I think it takes a lot of the utility out of that exercise, at least for industry, because again, if we're not doing it in person, and let's be honest, some of us, I think pretty much anybody can be almost like decently effective doing a Teams meeting. Like when you're in person, it's just a little bit different. You gotta step up your game a little bit. And you really have to have your A players doing those types of things, and people who actually have experience doing those types of things, right?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I would say I like them personally, because I get a significant amount of anxiety about them, even though I think I also am pretty good at them. But
they're crazy stressful.
But prepping for them is very stressful, and I'm very happy when I'm done with them. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess it's a hill I think I'd die on in terms of value for the government. On it, right? And
for sure.
It's not their job to make my life easy, unfortunately. Exactly. It's my job to make their life easy.
It's especially in value for time. That's what I'll say as well. Is like, it's not that it's the most valuable. I think there are more valuable things that can be done, but they take a lot. But those things take a lot of time. Not just for me, like you said, not your job to make my life easier. Setting up a true code challenge, setting up presentations, that is a lot harder than setting up orals is. And it's a shame that they don't get used more because of that value to time ratio, to be honest.
Until you have 75 bidders, but
yes, that's fair. Yeah. No, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
Down select.
What I'll say is that the advisory down select is also less used than I think it should be, because
I'm seeing it more and more.
Yeah, it seems like people are waking. We've started suggesting it in Q&As more, mostly when something's coming out where it's like, oh, that seems like a lot of work. Can we like set an advisory down select about here? That would be better for everybody.
You gotta have those pass fails, and at least that past performance drill or something, right up front, and then you really weed out some of those folks that are just no hopers.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, or just the graspers, right? I mean. Yeah. At least then they go in knowing. And so, yeah, a much lower bar, corporate experience or past performance, something like that, right? Where it says, at least, have you done something like this before? Tell us about it. Awesome. We think that you have a shot. We would like to hear your voice. Yeah.
It's becoming more popular. We've also seen people do it as gate criteria, which is similar to advisory down select, except that it's pass fail and they still make you do the whole thing. But they don't have to read your proposal if you fail those initial steps. So it's kind of the worst for the vendor, but the government doesn't care kind of situation. That's another. It's a similar version allowing the government to make their job reading or processing easier. It's a little less effective for the vendor side of getting feedback mid-cycle.
But I think, sorry, Kevin. I was just going to say, I think the government's starting to realize that if they're a little bit more respectful of industry time, it's actually going to come back to them in a positive way. It makes life easier for everybody. They're going to get better
stomp
results.
That, Kev, 100%.
So in kind of some closing thoughts here, one thing that I did want to ask is, do you guys feel as though these alternative approaches to procurement, and this is kind of an on the whole question, because that's the real question here, is that RFPs, the traditional written process, that's the standard. Everything else is what's quote unquote different. On the whole, is different procurement better? It depends. Yes, easy no.
I think for sure. I'm going to equivocate and say it depends, like initially, but I think if and you can also certainly say, okay, let's assume that a great challenge is put together, or a great set of requirements has been written. So you just the best possible expectations there. I still think there are some pretty. I'm going to go with the answer, I guess, around if your requirements are still pretty generalized. I think that pushes you a little more towards a challenge being a good way just to vet people, for sure, and just also, I guess it may devalue the players who are able to get as like key bits of intel and the things that you put into those written proposals of like, oh, they really hate this technology, or they love this one, or don't mention this, which, like, if you're talking about playing field and newcomers that maybe don't have access to to those relationships and everything, they can just come in and go, I don't know, we don't know any of that, but we're pretty good at putting together an agile team. So it can maybe actually, kind of give them, granted, they're not going to have the context. They're not going to know that background that maybe you actually want. But if you're really more concerned about just simply somebody who can come in and be your agile software factory, like, yeah, Tech Challenge is a pretty good way to achieve that, I think.
Yeah.
All I was going to say is my thought is that it obviates the need for a lot of the traditional proposal. I don't think it necessarily obviates the need for all of it. And there are some, especially and I'm just going to think at the vehicle level, when you think about something like Oasis and really hardcore professional services, right? Things that are a lot more about staffing, capturing incumbent staff, just kind of having that machine and feeding that work service. I actually do think traditional RFPs are probably better. They speak more towards your ability to interact. And let's be real, that's the majority of the government's dollars being spent. Just in large, the government builds a lot of software. We do it for them. It's our favorite work to do. But most of what the government does is not that. And so when you're not doing that, I think, and even orals for something like that is kind of lazy to me, because it's basically you saying you don't want to read a bunch of proposals, you just want to talk to the people that have been sitting in your office for the last 4 years again, and whoever captures the most of them for orals wins, which I've totally seen on Oasis, by the way. But like that's it just seems like that's what RFPs were really meant for. And when you start getting into technology and technology development, even technology sustainment, if you're going to include orals and non-technical challenges and alternative procurement, I think they're always better for technology. I think that's my hot take. I think for technology, they're always better. Not for all of government contracting, but for the subspace of technology. And if you throw in orals and other non-technical challenge forms of alternative procurement.
So here's my hot take. For non-commoditized services, they're good.
Yes.
So I don't want orals. I don't want challenges to buy tires, ice, and parachute cord, right? I don't want it for help desk.
Yeah.
I don't want it for commoditized, just generic IT support. The more and more definitive the requirements are upfront and the more unchanging they are, the less necessary it is. So what I would say is there's plenty of commoditized technology procurements out there that don't need it. An IT help desk, I don't need to do that, right? I don't know what value that would provide, right? There are really well-worn formula for staffing, addressing it, best practices around IVRs and all of that stuff, right? There's a known body of knowledge around there. Where you get to things, what you need is, no joke, you need to buy people's brains to figure out what you don't know yet. That's where you get it.
So I guess I'll challenge you a little bit, and I'm kind of agreeing with you, to be clear. But
I love an argument.
But even in help desk, right? And what I technically said was it's always better for technology. I guess you're right. It's probably not always best value for technology, But if you want a better help desk, you think your help desk needs are unique and special for, you got a lot of VIPs, you do a lot of classified, whatever your special reason is, there's a bunch, everyone's got a reason. Would you argue that orals will still get you the better, would not get you the better result? I'll agree with you that it might not be the best value of your time, and certainly not as a category. I'm eating my words there. But in my broader thesis of it would be better, do you not think oral that better?
So what I would say is, if you legit need a best value trade off, right? Like I can provide an LPTA commoditized service. Now, not everyone's going to be happy with it, right? Now, orals for help desk, talking to the help desk manager to understand that, or if there's big changes going on through it, sure, that could help. But the vast majority of the decision around that is going to be around a written proposal. And I think that's where you're going to get that, because what you're going to want to see is, what is your staffing plan? How do you handle, 3 shifts? How do you handle VIPs? Because done right with that sort of thing, the amount of metrics and knowledge going in that the government can provide, while it's not, I wouldn't call it steady state, it is way more information rich than a code challenge style procurement would need, right? Where they say, hey, we know from history, a senior agent can handle, 25 tickets a day. A mid-level agent can handle 15 tickets a day. A junior agent can handle 17 tickets a day, as long as they're this kind. There's this number. This is what it is. Here's our staffing plan. Here's how we go. You can put that all in. And honestly, putting that in orals is a waste of people's time, right? Because it's a meeting where it could have been a memo.
No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point.
Well, the amount of overhead associated with like doing these orals, can you imagine? Because, I mean, help desk work is very approachable for a lot of companies.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to do well, but it's very approachable because there's so much data around it and so much body of knowledge to it, right? And so, I mean, I picked that because it's the easiest for me for, commoditized IT, right?
Well, it's also a good example of a commodity that some people care about and pay a premium for, and some people don't. So it's that's why I challenged with the question, right? Because there's, even though it's highly commoditized, and you're probably right, even all the things that I would envision in an orals for a better help desk can just be in key personnel and specific requirements in a proposal, right? Like there's really nothing that you would get better out of orals. I think you're probably right about that. But it is a good example where the range is vast, right? And you get quality for, you don't always get quality for paying for more, but you do need to pay more to get quality in that space.
100%. Yeah. Oh, I mean, nothing in that I have seen in my life makes me believe that you don't get what you pay for. You absolutely get what you pay for. Sometimes you don't get as good as you think you should get for what you paid for, but I guarantee if you paid less, it'd be worse.
That has been my experience. Well, unless you switch from a large to a small, but I won't go there.
I mean, not from anybody to highlight.
Sorry, no offense to present company. I meant Beltway Bandit large, not highlight large.
So he means like khaki, Kevin.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I meant. I don't, when I think of large, that's not how I generally think of you guys.
No, and I mean, as an emerging large, mid-tier, whatever you want to call it. I mean, technically, we just submitted our first SIBR. We're a small for SIBRs. So
yeah.
There you go.
Probably also under the telco codes, the ones where it's about 1,000 employees or less.
Exactly. Yeah. So anything that's headcount based, we're still small.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. This is a lot of fun. I really appreciate the insights, and join us next time for another edition of the Hunter Podcast.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, y'all.
Fun.